How's it going, mates? Asdos here, and we will be talking about Rift, a free-to-play MMO developed by Trion Worlds, who also developed the Shooter MMO Defiance and the more recent voxel MMO Trove. Rift is a theme park MMORPG, most immediately comparable to World of Warcraft, but with plenty of features to set it apart from being yet another generic WoW clone. However, there will still be a fair amount of comparisons made to WoW anyway, just because it is the trade standard for MMORPGs based on population and how widely the game is known. So whether you love or hate WoW, it's still useful to us as a point of reference that most people can relate to. Now, Rift came out back in 2011, so it's not a new game. Why talk about it then? Well, although it is a relatively obscure game with just a handful of servers per region, it does have a lot of merits that I haven't really found in other MMOs, and I've been around so much when it comes to MMOs that even hookers give me judgmental looks. It's also a modern free-to-play game with a very generous business model. This means there's no financial or time commitment in trying it out, giving it a huge advantage over the majority of similar games that have an entry fee merely to look around, and or a monthly subscription that compels you to play even if you don't feel like it, just to justify the rental. So Rift is relevant because it's free and it's good, two concepts that very rarely go together in gaming. More than that, the MMO scene has been a giant shitfest for a very long time, so those with an MMO itch might be able to get it scratched here. Now the game isn't perfect, no, far from it. In fact, if we were to start this discussion traditionally with the basics, Rift has a fairly rough start, though I'd recommend listening to the full picture as I do think this game has a lot to offer. With that said, the basics. Graphics are a mixed bag. Animations are stiff and generally terrible, the art itself is average and unremarkable, but many of the environments are really quite charming. Watching rifts open in real time right next to you is impressively cinematic, and the new expansion zones in particular entertaining to explore just because of their appearance. The sound is bland, and with the exception of this video, I usually play with it off. However, there is a special note to make here. The voice acting in Rift is so absolutely terrible that I like it. Prince Hylas makes me laugh every time he speaks, and I actually turn the sound on just to get a chuckle from it. But if you're a VA snob, you have been more than advanced. With that said, there is one exception to this that I found completely by mistake in the first 30 minutes of questing in the latest expansion. Did you like the narration in Bastion and Transistor? Of course you did. Now, don't get your hopes up because it's nowhere near that level, and it's only about 10 minutes of content. But it was pretty damn good, and if you get there, I would recommend playing with the sound on. Lore and story are a bit shaky in Rift because all of the player characters are immortal demigods known as Ascended that the general population loves and reveres. A bit overkill on the player empowerment there in my opinion. The game is set on a world called Talara, and invaders from other planes keep barging in from Rifts uninvited to try and fuck everything up. Your job of course is to slap them upside the head until they leave. Rift gives you more or less the same goal as other theme park MMOs. You make a character, you level to cap, and then you acquire shinies to improve your character. Rift does have a lot of extra activities unrelated to progression for those who care for that sort of thing, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Character creation is very much as you'd expect. You start by picking your faction, the traditional Guardians or the technological Defiance, and then you pick your race according to that. It's worth mentioning that while factions originally served as a divide, similar to Alliance vs Horde in WoW, that's no longer the case, as you can group, guild, and raid with people regardless of their faction. The only thing you can't do is visit the other faction's capital, and to be quite honest with you, they aren't that impressive anyway. Trion justified this with some lore tweaks, and I applaud the effort. Do you really need to split the player base in half just to explain PvP mechanics? Seems pretty archaic to me, and just because WoW does it, doesn't make it a good idea. Good for you, Trion. After that, you get to the most important decision you'll ever make in the game. Your class. Now class is a huge subject in this game, so I'm just going to touch on the final aspect of character creation that comes after picking your class, because I know it's important to most people. Customization. It's decent. There's sliders and colours and all that good stuff. Nothing groundbreaking, but nothing terrible either. Back to the much more important subject of classes. Now there's only 4 to choose from, but hear me out, because this game offers way more total classes as we understand them than most. Think of a class in Rift as an archetype, and each archetype has different souls. Now a soul in Rift is what you and I would normally call a class. Considering each class has 8 souls to start with, or 10 if you have the expansions, you see where this is going, don't you? And this isn't a gimmick like in most MMOs where abilities are recycled. These are proper classes in their own right. For example, rogues have the ranger soul that mixes archery with a pet and functions just like a WoW hunter, as well as the saboteur soul that focuses on gadgets and explosives similar to Guild Wars 2 engineers. So there are plenty of souls that will be familiar to the average MMO player, but there are also lots of souls that are off the charts. The reason I actually started playing Rift was because I used to joke amongst my friends that I'd one day play a rogue tank in an MMO. Rift gave me that tank, and that tank is the Riftstalker. Riftstalkers are dual-wielding, level-wearing, teleporting tanks, and they're exactly as cool as they sound. Yes, rogues can tank, and yes, they can tank raids just like every other class. I wasn't bluffing with the capture in this video, and the examples I just gave are only some of the souls from one of the classes. Your character is a combination of 3 souls of your choosing, and you can split your points up as you like. Now I do want to make one point quite strongly before we continue, because I know this part has always taken flack as false advertising, which is completely unfounded. You do have absolute freedom of your character, but with absolute freedom comes the ability to absolutely fuck up. There's nothing stopping me from picking a tanking soul, a healing soul, and a damage soul and splitting all the points evenly. But it would be a logical absurdity to let me tank, heal, and do damage all at the same level as people who spec fully into those roles. That's not how it works, and it should never work that way. These hybrid builds are fine for leveling, PvP, and easy content, but you're not going to be invited as a main tank to raids with 10 of your 76 skill points in a tanking soul. Most of my builds are home brewed, so experimentation is possible and encouraged. It just requires a bit of common sense and realistic expectations of how much power you can get from your character if you choose to build them too thin. To give an example of how different builds can be just as viable, I run my Physician, which is the rogue healer soul, with spare points in Tactician because I like the heal over time synergy and the extra energy regen to let me use more abilities more often. However, I've seen plenty of people go Bard as their secondary instead to great effect, using buffs and debuffs to compensate for what I have over them. I personally hate Bards, but that's variation without sacrificing effectiveness, and that's exactly how an MMO should be. Rift introduces a 4th role called Support. They do shit damage and shit healing, but they have buffs. Thing is, these buffs don't justify their slot in a group unless it's a raid where they affect many players at once. Even worse than that, the Dungeon Finder forces the 5th slot to be reserved for a support. Know what people do? They sign up as a support and then they just go DPS anyway, because it's better for them and the group. As you can probably tell, I'm not a fan of the existence of this forced role. Do you know what we usually call support roles in MMOs? Tanks and healers, because they support the guys actually killing stuff. If damage isn't your thing, why not just play one of those instead? I mean, have you seen the dungeon queues in every MMO ever for a tank or healer? It's a good time to be one, guys. The holy trinity of tank, healer and damage is tried and tested. It works and it works well. Guild Wars 2 tried to fuck with that, and even though I have about 95% positive things to say about that game, messing with the trinity is a really bad idea. It doesn't work. It is chaotic and it is messy. I'm not talking about the good kind of messy you might find in certain adult German titles, but the kind where you put on your favourite shirt fresh from the cleaners and spill your drink all over it. The shirt was white and your drink was not. They just don't go together, guys. Apart from that, the system itself is great, even if it is needlessly fiddly. It means that a single character can be so much more than in most other MMOs, and just at the click of one button. I'm talking main tanking mages and main healing warriors here. They're not just gimmicks, they actually work. It makes it much easier to fill rosters in a pinch, or to try different things without committing to a brand new character. As a side note, as much as I love the soul system itself, one of my major criticisms of the game is the unnecessary massive abilities you get. Unlike WoW, where you could just ignore most of them and put them aside, you'll have to use the majority of these to do your job well, which forces you to learn to macro them together, or face several walls of buttons, which isn't much fun. Now, macros aren't complicated at all and can be easily researched, but it's a nuisance that really shouldn't be there. Clicking a 15-second buff every 30 seconds, 10 abilities that all hit target for X. Why? It doesn't make the game deeper, it puts a fedora on it and tells me that I lack the intellect to understand such a deep design decision. You could seriously cut out 80% of the abilities in the game and it would work just fine without making it spammy. On that subject, can we make some or all of the self buffs passive? Some soul combinations have an entire bar dedicated to that crap. Trion, please. For me, the perfect MMO would take the diversity of Rift souls and condense them to WoW levels, trimming off the crap but keeping what makes the Rift souls unique. Here's to hoping, right? Now for leveling, you can actually choose how you do it. You can quest or dungeon your way to cap in very much the same way as WoW if that floats your boat. And Rift has a mentor sidekick system that lets you fit in almost anywhere for XP, rather than being locked to your current level. This is especially useful for running the dungeons you like rather than the ones that are appropriate, though bosses are not going to change their loot to suit you. It also lets you team up with your friends, outdoors and in, to get rid of that archaic and shitty level restriction that for some reason is still present in the vast majority of MMOs. Do devs not understand that people want to play together and that level brackets make this practically impossible until cap? Step it up, guys, please. Take a page from Rift and Guild Wars 2. A quick disclaimer here though, Rift's malleable level system is much better than most games, but not as awesome as Guild Wars 2, because you will be gated by expansion level brackets. For example, if someone is level 51, which is Storm Legion tier, and they group with a level 49 that's still in vanilla, the 51 is going to have to go back to vanilla and get really shitty XP. I mean, it works for the 49, but it'd be great if everyone was progressing together seamlessly like they do in Guild Wars 2. If the classic WoW style of leveling isn't for you, then there's other means as well. You have instant adventures, which are basically giant quests given out to scale to the number of people taking part. So if you get put in an instant adventure raid with 9 other people, mobs will be that much tougher to take down, which is pretty fun as long as people don't AFK. Oh, and the instant part is quite literal. You teleport straight to the action with no bullshit. There's also the game's namesake, Rifts, which is similar to the public quest in Warhammer for those who played it before it bit the big one. Rest in peace. These are found randomly around the open world, but otherwise function like instant adventures with the core difference of having stages. Every time you advance a stage by completing the objective, the difficulty and the rewards will just keep ramping up. This is especially true in the latest expansion where Nightmare Rifts will just keep going until you can't handle it. These are a ton of fun and I wish they were more frequent. It's also the main place to see large amounts of random players all working together with a common goal, similar to what you might see in Guild Wars 2 events. MMO players working together. How fucked up is that? Once you're actually at the level cap, it's time to do expert versions of the dungeons, which have exactly the same concept as heroics and WoW. Harder copies of lower level instances with better loot. They're pretty cool, and you can see the normal version of the dungeons in the background throughout this whole video. I haven't taken raiding or PvP in MMOs seriously for quite a few years, so I couldn't comment on those in Rift with any authority, but I do know that raids are as you've come to expect, with 10 and 20 man variants, as well as different tiers of difficulty and loot. The same can be said for PvP in that you get battlegrounds to fight it out. Because factions have been ditched, everyone is a mercenary assigned to a team at random and it works just fine. Now beyond all of that good stuff, Rift has a huge amount of fluff as well. Extra activities that are for fun rather than the progression of your character. While I'm a practical guy and don't really care for that stuff, I know that most people do to an extent, and there's plenty of activities for that type of player too. You can go achievement nerding if that's your thing, and the wardrobe system lets you change your look without affecting your stats or even charging you a fee. There's also an artifact collection system that encourages exploration of the open world. The major bit of fluff in the game though is called dimensions, which we'd all know simply as housing. People can and have created some very impressive dimensions as you can see in the background. A fair word of caution though is that dimensions take a very long time to make compared to other MMOs such as WildStar, where it's pretty much drop a house and you're done. Now you can't talk about a free to play game without talking about the business model. And honestly, Trion is pretty damn generous. You could make a new account right now and level to cap through the vanilla experience and the 2 expansions. All zones, all dungeons, all raids are available for the grand price of absolutely nothing. More than that, if you really do want stuff from the cash shop, you can just buy the credits from other players with in-game gold. I haven't paid a penny since the game went free to play and I don't even farm. Now obviously, Trion are a business and they want your money. The Rift cash shop is huge with everything from convenience like XP buffs to cosmetics like pretty mounts. Free players only get 2 character slots without acquiring credits, but remember that that's half the classes in the game. Not bad. Here are some things that you might have some moral objections with though, but remember that you can effectively buy these for gold if you want, and this stuff is also what keeps the game free for you and me to play. You can buy any gear in the game except the top tier at the time. Yes, that means you can throw your wallet at your Fresh 65 and deck them out in almost best in slot gear. I don't like this in principle, but it's so expensive to do that no one really does it. You only start with the vanilla souls. Now that's not as bad as it sounds because you still get 8 souls per class and they all do their job well. Most notably, you won't start with access to warrior healers, warrior range DPS, rogue healers or mage tanks. Clerics are the only class that can fill every role right out of the box, so that's something to keep in mind if you're starting out. This doesn't bother me much because we've been buying classes since the dawn of MMOs anyway, but I'm sure it might piss some people off. The latest expansion introduced earring slots with stats and you don't get access to them without farming a special currency at cap. Unless there's a special sale too, you can't even bypass this one with credits. You need to buy a digital copy of the expansion to get it before cap. Min-maxing until then is absolutely unnecessary, but it's another moral based gripe. Boosts are never necessary, but token acquisition at cap was extremely slow in the expansion before this one. Although I haven't capped myself because I'm too busy making videos for you mates, forums and other sources seem to suggest this hasn't been improved, perhaps to encourage you to buy token boost pots. However, bosses of course still all drop loot anyway. And that's how they do business. Compared to most MMO business models, it's pretty damn fair. So to recap on the main make or breaks of Rift, starting with the good stuff. Rift lets you play any class as any role. It's the caption of the video and well worth repeating on merit alone. Rift encourages social behaviour way more than most MMOs. Not as much as Guild Wars 2 sadly, but what MMO does? Rift's business model is extremely generous. Mates, you can play this from 1 to cap without ever paying a penny and it'll still give you the full experience. What about the things I think Rift doesn't do so well? Unfortunately, there's a lot of small nuisances in the game that can really build up and get under your skin. Like the bloated as fuck hotbars. I can and do macro that stuff, but should I have to? No. No, I fucking shouldn't. The soul system presents itself as more complicated than it really is, which I'm sure will scare off a lot of new players, but it's honestly not that bad once you sink your teeth in. The pacing acquiring gear at cap might be slow without boosts. I'm not there myself, but research suggests that's still the case unfortunately. Overall, if you like this style of MMO, then Rift is absolutely worth a look. There's no fee to try or play, which lets you pick up and drop the game to suit your daily schedule. If you like WoW, you'll probably like Rift. If you used to like WoW but think it's old now and want something new yet familiar, you'll probably like Rift. And if a huge list of functional classes gives you an uncontrollable boner, even if you're not a dude, then I'm almost certain you'll like Rift. Thanks for watching and I hope you found this useful. If you feel like chatting about this game, feel free to drop a comment down below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. This has been Asdos, and as always, I bid you a good night.